Hello, good day. I am Camille Joasi Palad,
And I am Micaela Abigail E. Libot.
and we are from Group 6, and we are the presenters for today's topic. Well, starting off, hello everyone. I know some of you are already familiar with some literature from all over the world, like the Hunger Games, the Harry Potter book series, the Chronicles of Narnia, and the Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
But have you guys ever encountered a literature from Japan? Yes, we know some kind of literature from Japan like the famous manga among our generation, but do we know something about the history, the themes, or even the famous writers that became the foundation of the literature in Japan?
Maybe some of them knows partner, but I think the majority of our generation doesn't have any idea on what we are talking about.
Well then, shall we begin?
Kick things off, let's first tackle the history of Japanese literature.
Did you know the early beginning of Japan's literature does not have any written language? They are only influenced by Chinese classical language. The Chinese classical language was believed to be used from 15th century BC to 2nd century AD, continued as a literary language until the 20th century.
As years have passed, the periods of Japanese history of literature progressed from having traditional ways of living to having their ways enhancing their culture, knowledge, and customs.
During the Asuka era, the Chinese writing system and Buddhism first arrived in Japan. Other genres prevalent in Japanese literature include travelogues, personal diaries, and compilations of random ideas and experiences in addition to novels, poetry, and theater. A vast amount of writing in classical Chinese was generated by Japanese writers in addition to works in the Japanese language.
Some of the important writers and literary pieces are Sherazade, which is written by Haruki Murakami, the Makioka Sisters, written by Tanizaki, Kinkakuji, or The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, which is written by Mishima Yukio, Kitchen, written by Banana, Yoshimoto, and many more.
I think I'm familiar with some of the literature that you have mentioned, partner.
Yes, partner. Some of the literatures that I mentioned are also famous because of the theme of their story.
But may I ask, why Japanese literature is unique compared to other literatures from all over the world?
Good question, partner. It's because Japanese literature is very diverse and versatile. They have their own ways of telling their history and culture through their literature. Their art, prose and poetry, and literary pieces are wonderful. You can really see their uniqueness and creativeness in bringing out the story behind each work.
Oh, I see. I think I remember one literary piece that changed a country's community, which is The Waiting Years written by Fumiko Enchi.
I think I know that too, partner.
The story of a female who is struggling with her life from an unfaithful husband, where it tackles the issues of exploitation, sexual labor, and women's rights in a modern time, where awakening and realizations of unfairness happening in the society they live in. Fumika's books portray the plight of women in a patriarchal society, where women suffer from the differences they are facing inequalities in their society.
That is a good story and a good way to address one problem of society, I think.
Moving on with the topic, since we are talking about literature here, I think it is fair to discuss also our own literature, which is the
Yes,
Philippine literature.
yes, I think I loved the literature of our country. In fact, I enjoyed our Filipino subject during my time in junior high school since every year we tackle different classic Philippine literature.
I also experienced that too. What classic Philippine literature did you enjoy the greatest?
I think the story of Ibong Adarna since it has unique story and plot.
Well, shall we discuss the history of our own Philippine literature?
Sure, partner.
Philippine literature reflects a diverse group of works that are mostly grounded on a traditional folk tales, socio-political histories, and real-life experiences. Such books have since promoted Filipino cultural values, told the daily struggles of locals, and have instilled a remarkable lesson.
Since our country was colonized by different countries, which is why our literature is also a unique one since it is a combination of different countries.
You're right, partner. In fact, the Philippine literature in different eras have specific characteristics. Pre-colonial period literature, characterized based on oral traditions, crude on ideology and phraseology. Spanish colonization period literature has the characteristics of having two distinct classifications, the religious and secular. Revolutionary period literature was characterized by the planted seeds of nationalism in Filipinos. The language shifted from Spanish to Tagalog, while American colonization period talks about Filipino writers imitating English.
That's why most Filipinos are good at speaking the English language. And we also use some Spanish words in our daily lives, like in counting.
Yes, the two countries contributed a lot in our culture and literature.
I think some of the known literatures from our country are the two controversial novels of Dr. Jose Rizal himself, which are the No Me Tangere, which is Touch Me Not in English, and El Filibusterismo, in English, The Reign of Greed. Florante at Laura, which is written by the great Francisco Balictas Baltazar. Decada 60, which is in the 70s, written by Lualhati Bautista, and many more.
Those are one of the well-known literary pieces in our country.
Yes, partner. That is why I salute the Filipino writers that are not afraid to speak of the truth and to defend the oppressed in our society. They also showcase the talent of our own. And I can say that mabuhay ang mga Pilipinong manunulat.
Compared to the literature from other countries, what is the reason why we should be proud of our own literature, partner?
I think the Philippine literature is indeed beautiful because it gives us knowledge and understanding about the diverse group of works, and it gives us nostalgic feelings and enjoyment to explore the beautiful Philippine poems, stories, essays, and plays.
I shall agree with that, partner.
I remembered mentioning the two controversial novels of our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal,
Yes, I remember that. But why did you recall that again, partner?
because it is one of the significant literary pieces in the history of the Philippine literature. Is No Limit Tangere by Jose Rizal, which is one of the greatest novels in the Philippines. The story is the most controversial and widely known because that sparked the social awakening of the Filipinos during the Spanish colonial era. Dr. Jose Rizal raised his voice by writing a story to awaken Filipinos about the unfairness of the Spanish priest and the ruling government at that time. He used his voice by purposely writing the book to expose the ills of the Philippine society at that era. Rizal continued the story by having a second book, which is El Filibusterismo, that shows how Crisostomo Ibarra dealt with the Spanish authorities and prepared for his revenge. Truly, it became remarkable because Rizal reminded us to become aware and raise our voices in our society, especially to the oppressed, and particularly with what is happening today.
That is quite a good explanation, partner.
But if we are going to compare the Japanese literature and the Philippine literature, what do you think is the similarities or the differences of the two mentioned literature?
I think the themes are similar since both of the literatures portray their culture and their history through stories, poems, or any form of literature.
But for the differences,
I think the differences of the two are first the language, since language is the crucial thing for the Japanese literature, and since the Philippine literature is influenced by two countries. Also, the writing styles or techniques are different.
what do you mean by writing styles or techniques, partner?
As you recall, Francisco Balagtas Baltazar uses a unique way to tell a story, which is using a flashback. The well-known novel Florante at Laura is only a big throwback Thursday because it is narrated by the point of view of Florante and Aladdin compared to the Japanese literature. Usually, they only use a first-person point of view writing technique.
Good point, partner. As our conversation comes to an end, what do you think is the current status of the literature in both countries?
I think the status of both literatures are also similar since most of the produced or the novels that are written nowadays are about romance or any other usual genres that is used. I also think the writers are also not being treated well or does not get a recognition that they deserve. Since people nowadays does not care about who is the author, they just want to read the work.
And that concludes our topic for the day.